The City of London is iconic for many things: great museums, art and statues, the Thames, the history of Western culture and democracy, the subway or tube, and civility. Join us as we explore London by tube, by foot, and by boat. 13.6 million call Greater London home, and the Tube provides 5 million rides daily on 11 lines servicing 270 stations. Begun in 1863, the London Tube is the world's oldest subway. At the historic center of London is the 900-year-old castle known as the London Tower, founded by William the Conqueror in 1066 and begun construction in 1078. Kings and queens found refuge inside while their enemies were imprisoned in tower dungeons, awaiting the executioner's axe. Ravens too have made the tower their home. It is said that as long as the ravens remain at the tower, it shall stand and the crown with it. Adjacent London Tower and tucked behind Tower Bridge and buildings is a small marina. Modern yachts share the moorings with vintage Thames River barges. Access to the Thames is through a set of locks, for the tide at London is mighty, at times upwards of 20 feet, and a current that can attain 5 knots. Proudly astride the Thames is the Tower Bridge, started in 1886. To the west of Tower Bridge and nearby is Borough Market, the oldest market in London, begun in 1861. You can tell when you are close by the savory aromas. London Walks is a consortium of guides who lead 2-hour walks about London 7 days a week. This evening, we hurried to meet the London Walks guide covering the rock and roll history of London.
Wait, look, we've got Regent Sound Studios. It hasn't been a studio since 1969. It's a good guitar shop today. Enter the Rolling Stones, who made their first album here in 1963.
We stopped at a small cafe, and our guide gave us a concert.
Well, never mind, we are happy, we have music.
Later that Halloween evening, we enjoyed the street life of London, then tubed back to our hotel. We descended into the tube at Piccadilly Circus to the tune of an as yet undiscovered artist. The next morning we headed to St. James Park, stretching between Buckingham Palace and Westminster Abbey. The Queen was at home, so we were not invited in. It's a short and beautiful walk between Buckingham Palace and Westminster Abbey. Pigeon Man of St. James Park.
Ciao.
Westminster Abbey is the cathedral for Great Britain and nobility. In the floor of the cathedral are hundreds of graves representing a who's who of Great Britain. The changing of the guards at Buckingham Palace begins at the Horse Guards Parade Ground near Whitehall, and then the guards proceed to Buckingham Palace. Number 10 Downing Street is just down the block off Whitehall. Big Ben was getting an upgrade, having been constructed in 1859. Nearby is Trafalgar Square. In the center, Nelson's column commemorates him as England's greatest admiral and honors his fateful victory at Trafalgar. Admiralty Arch connects the mall with Trafalgar Square. Only the Queen can travel through the center arch. Nearby, we met our London Walks guide for Sherlock Holmes. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was trained as a physician, but found writing to be both more profitable and pleasurable than medicine. We traveled the same back alleys, streets, and gardens as Sherlock Holmes. Passing through Covent Gardens, we made our way into the theater district, passing where Holmes' stories played out on stage.
Stopped writing short stories for a while, gave up. Has been for over 60 years now the recreation of the sitting room of 221B, which is
Later that evening, we caught up with another London Walks guide who took us on a pub crawl along the south bank of the Thames. Along the way, we learned about the earliest London town and the original Old Globe Theatre. As we walked, the view was spectacular. This is the reconstructed Old Globe Theatre.
But they've got a bar in there as well, and it's an amazing pub. You know, as I say, it's the oldest one in London, possibly one of the oldest in the country. So very unique. Also happens to be, it was Charles Dickens used to drink in this very pub. One of his novels is called Little Dorrit, set on the south bank of the River Thames, all about where the Marshalsea prison was, where his father was in prison for debt. For those of you that know Dickens.
The following day, we took the tube to Camden Town and its famous flea market. From there, we walked south along the canal through Regent's Park till we reached Little Venice and a barge trip back to Camden.
Oh yeah! Oh yeah!
40 years ago, I got drunk, fell in a fight, and I also got pissed up on a push cycle, and a criminal damage and sticker to a lamppost. Because of them three things, I don't think I could even get into the state.
These are narrowboats, and the narrowboats you are looking at are modern and built for people to live on, not for carrying cargo. So the tunnel has now become clear and we can continue on our journey. So, as we exit the tunnel, the horse would be waiting on the towpath on the left-hand side, and we would continue under 1 horsepower. Fruit from the Mediterranean, timber from America, tea, coffee and spices from the East. Houses in a similar style to the old John Nash houses. Now would anyone...
From our hotel in Kensington, it was a short walk to the Natural History Museum, the the Science Museum, and the Victoria and Albert Museum. All are free except for special exhibits. A needed break for pastries and a photo op with one of the red telephone booths, followed by a delicious ethnic Lebanese dinner, capped off our day. Next day, we caught a ferry on the Thames out to Greenwich. It afforded spectacular views of the city. Don't stand up. Take your head off.
A pillar topped with a gilded flame.
Known as the Walkie-Talkie Building, great views can be had on top.
Today, this glass-covered building is known as the Shard of Glass. It stands 310 meters, or 1,017 feet tall.
London Tower from the Thames, and close by, the Tower Bridge.
This tour looks at some of those changes, with stories about London, past and present.
In Greenwich, we explored the Maritime Museum, which includes Admiral Nelson's actual uniform. The red arrow marks the bullet hole that killed Nelson. The Royal Observatory is where east and west longitude face off in a line that circles the planet. There too is the restored Cutty Sark, the fastest clipper ship that ever sailed. On our next to the last day, we toured St. Paul's Cathedral, the church for Londoners. In the catacombs underneath the cathedral is buried Admiral Nelson. The church was designed by Sir Christopher Wren and built 300 years ago in the Baroque style. On our last night, we headed to Oxford Circus in the Soho district to take in the holiday lights and cheer on Regent, Oxford, and Carnaby streets, while the poppies reminded us to pay our respects to all our veterans. And then it was back across the pond, across southern Greenland, Baffin Island, and Alberta, and on to San Diego.